Now, as we look at the longer term forecast, we get our analog years. As we go back, we look at where we're at, where we've been, and where some of the models are forecasting, and we come up with the analog years. And these are the analog years that we're going to be using for this year, and for not only for the fall, but right now for the winter as well. And we'll keep an eye on that. Those could change a little bit, but for the fall outlook, that's what we've got. Now, when we talk about the INSO, we refer to mostly INSO 1, 2, and 3 or 4. You hear me talking about, whether it's in the eastern portions of the Pacific or the western, and where the ultimately the warmest or coolest temperatures set up often determine where some of the big blocking highs or lows quite often will be, and that circulation around those has an effect on the long term, what we might expect. Now, the September outlook from NOAA has gone down to an equal chance. 15 days ago, this forecast was to be for a very warm September across much of the U.S., but with the obvious cold weather we're expecting here over the first 10 to 14 days of the month, you can see they've now brought that to an equal chance, because we do expect, although we're going to be very cold over the next 10 days, we expect that we're going to see quite a bit of warming as we get into the middle and end of the month. So we'll keep an eye on that, but certainly the coldest temperatures of the month are going to be at the very beginning. So if we look at over the upcoming months as far as the INSO event, you can see most of the forecast models across the world are indicating that we're going to be in a neutral, whether it be positive or negative neutral event. So again, this has been kind of the pattern where we wavered between a weak El Nino to a weak La Nina. Again, this is expected to be continue right on through much of the winter into the spring. And the same, this is the mid-month forecast, so again shows very much a similar forecast as far as the INSO event to be remaining in a negative state. And again, that's generally, as far as the fall, is a fairly decent warm pattern for the Great Lakes here in Michigan. And for the winter, that usually means the potential we could see a pretty active and potentially cold winter as well here when we're in the neutral pattern. Now, last year, you can see we had a lot of cold water that streamed from Asia into the Pacific, into the northern Pacific areas, and that does not really promote much in the way of high pressure. It more or less at low, and that sends more of a zonal flow across much of the U.S. And again, with very warm conditions right off the eastern seaboard, that also promotes a high off there. So we had a lot of things going against cold temperatures last year, but we did have a fairly good amount of snow in some areas. Here in Breckenridge, we were about 8 inches below normal, but we expect that with the outlook now and the current conditions, we see much warmer waters across the Gulf of Alaska, and there is some cold water out there, but certainly not to the extent that we had last year. And also, some of the warmest waters are now a little farther off to the east, so this should be a pretty good feature as far as a cold winter goes, and a potentially stormy one, especially when we look at some of the analog years. Now, as far as, again, the forecasted by the models, you can see almost 2/3 of the odds are that we'll continue to stay in that neutral event. And that's what the model showed on those charts that I had earlier. If there's any trend in the longer term, it's a slowly increasing odds that we may eventually go into an El Nino, much more so than chances of it going back to a La Nina. And right now we are kind of in a colder state, but again, we expect in the long term to either be neutral or maybe possibly going into a weak El Nino as we get deeper into the winter and spring months. As far as the outlook from the Climate Prediction Center for the months of September, October, and November, again, looks like warm across much of the U.S. And again, that is a favorable pattern when you look at the INSO event that we were talking about. And as far as precipitation, just a little bit better chance of wetter than normal across the Gulf states and southeast and parts of Texas. And again, for us, an equal chance across the area. In fact, this pie chart is actually for Lansing, and it shows pretty much a 1/3 of chance for either equal or normal amount of precipitation or above or below. So again, looks like a near normal precipitation with above normal temperatures forecasted for the fall months of September, October, November. And so it looks like it's going to be a decent fall for harvest as we get started here over the next couple of weeks. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Have yourself a great day, a great weekend, and 73s to all.